Hi, everyone. Can you see my screen okay? Are you seeing
Yes.
Backyard Park? Wonderful. All right, Tess, ready when you are.
Okay, yeah. So good morning, guys. Our group includes Bronte, James, Idil, and myself, Tess. And we're very excited to share with you our concept for Backyard Park, our redesign of Columbia Park. So here you can see the surrounding context of the site, which we've all been introduced to already, located on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish people. The Columbia Park of today is surrounded by low-rise and single-family homes. The park is relatively flat and its programming is unactivated. On a clear day, it does have lovely views of the North Shore Mountains. Columbia Park of tomorrow will be nestled in the middle of a large development with buildings up to 18 stories tall. The new neighborhood will consist of a diverse demographic, including people with young children, students, low-income families, and working professionals. This future neighborhood will need a functional park. In our physical analysis of the site, starting with our cube diagram shown here, we first determined that the site currently is very exposed to sunlight, it has relatively flat topography, and it experiences poor drainage.
Our shade studies show lots of sun throughout the whole day in both the summer and winter. And while the new developments will add shade, these sun studies demonstrate the need for shading structures to protect park users from the heat. Moving to the wider context, the neighborhood is primarily composed of single-family housing, where many of these homes have private green spaces. And so with the new developments, these private green spaces will be replaced by tall buildings, which lack that same kind of accessibility to green spaces that private homes have. It's estimated that there will be 50,000 new residents by 2040, changing the neighborhood dramatically and presenting the need for good and accessible green space for a growing population. So from all of this analysis, we noted that the northwestern corner is composed of new developments, and this will be characterized by being very tall physically, being very active, loud, and shady. And in the southeastern corner, which is surrounded by townhouses, this area will be sunny, it'll be with shorter buildings, more passive activities, and be much more quiet. And so this analysis is used to help inform our programming as well as our design of the site.
Based on all this analysis, we decided that the most important issue that we wanted to address in our redesign was this rapidly increasing urban density. So moving from the bottom up in this graphic, our primary focus was social issues of density, so including a lack of social cohesion and a loss of private green spaces, as Bronte said, including those for play and exercise. And then next, moving up, we wanted to address environmental issues of density. So that includes loss of biodiversity and pollinator connectivity as a result of removing private gardens and street trees. And finally, we wanted to address technical considerations. So in particular, we wanted to moderate the extreme weather events of the year 2040 and also preserve views of the mountains.
Another important issue to address was the inclusivity of the park. We started by mapping out what we believe inclusivity means to us, and we quickly realized that what's important is having spaces which foster a sense of belonging, comfort, and safety for all. We aim to foster inclusivity by removing as many barriers as possible and creating a place that is yours, a place that feels like home. So to address all of these issues, we came to the solution of a shared backyard. Reflecting on experiences of our own backyards, we realized that we are four people from different places and backgrounds, but what our backyards have in common is that they give a sense of ownership and familiarity. They provide comfort and safety, and they're calm spaces where you feel like you belong.
So this realization finalized our concept. Our park design is a shared backyard with a network of adaptable spaces, providing a lattice for both community and ecology to grow on. We then asked ourselves what a backyard does, and we broke that down by season and time of day. We learned that activities like exercise and dog walking happen at all times of day and in all seasons. We also learned that the space is most social in the spring and summer months, where outdoor eating and gatherings take place. We took this knowledge and brought it to our earlier priorities. We started to connect ideas of a shared backyard to social, environmental, and technical aspects of the site. Then we had to apply our concept statement to the site physically. So we started to look at new ways to organize space. We liked a kind of spatial analogy to a typical backyard where it is more formal closest to the house and less formal at the edges. This left us with 3 zones and a kind of gradient moving from northwest to southeast.
So our design iterations explore our design development and process over the past few weeks, where we began with more curvilinear forms, started to look at programming, and then began to weave this idea that James has spoken of a typical backyard space, such as the lawn, deck, and garden, as different layers to our park. Honing in on this gradient of backyard elements, we started to move into more rectilinear forms. So these 2 forms speak to the design language we landed on. We started to think about the existing context and the form of the new developments and how that could be explored and reflected in our design. So with this design language and our gradient of backyard elements, we came to our final site plan. So beginning in the northwestern corner of the site, we designed this area as the deck, where there are places for sitting and relaxing. After the deck, you can step out onto the lawn where there are spaces for field games, places to barbecue, and terrace seating for viewers. As you move through the lawn, you will reach mounds that create a buffer between the more active deck and lawn from the quiet garden space. The garden area is characterized by calmer spaces, including the veggie patch, which is our community garden, and a more densely treed area in the secret garden. Along the western edge of our site, we have redesigned Alberta Street. So we've closed the street off from cars, creating a pedestrian and bike only zone. And we have our swale running down Alberta into our retention ponds at the base of the site. Along the edge of the condos, let me go back to the site then, thanks. Along the edge of the condos, we have designed patios that respond to the form of the new developments. And these patios offer space for cafe seating. And the decking material used here also connects Alberta Street to the rest of the park. So looking at our technical plan, you can see that we have a central mound that moves diagonally across our park. And so these mounds are more squared, speaking to our design language. This kind of design language is similarly shown in our deck, the open spaces, and the gridded trees we proposed. And these forms really begin to embrace the gridded nature of the urban fabric surrounding the park.
The spaces are arranged from formal to informal by creating terraces so that they can still be connected but provide experiences when in them. The deck is the highest part of the park, giving a view of the park, and the mound height varies to not fully block the view from the deck. The secret garden is in the lowest elevation, creating a quiet area and also acting as a final water catchment area with the retention pond. People can possibly grab their coffee from the shops below the new developments, enjoy the sip while walking along Alberta Street. When they hit the entrance, first they're welcomed by the deck, where they can enjoy the tree canopy popping out of the deck, sit underneath or walk through, while maybe watching the game of soccer or children playing in the field and the meadows. If you want a more humble experience, then you can walk along the terrace seating and enjoy reading a book while sipping your coffee. Then you walk up the mounds and see the beautiful views of the mountains. In this park, families can garden together in the south-facing terrace community gardens. If their children want to have fun, they can run along to the playground that was built by the trees that ended up being removed from the site, that children can enjoy running along or jumping over the wood play elements. The playground on the community gardens are on either side of a mound, where at the top of it is a pergola that would be a gathering space at the end of the day, for example, or provide shade in the summer. The off-leash dog park is to the northeast corner of our park. The dog owners can either play with their dogs or sit down and watch them while taking a rest from the long walk that they have been on. And the mounding also provides some shelter for park users who would prefer to avoid the dogs. Moving on to our wet and dry conditions, our swales and retention ponds are placed to reduce the load on the city's infrastructure. During the wet season, the water is mainly collected from main route coming from Queen Elizabeth Park, together with the new development roofs. The meadows are placed so that they can absorb water before it gets into the swale. In the dry months, in the summer, the water has been absorbed by the site and the water retention areas are now dry. The tree canopy lining Alberta Street will provide shade, and it will be a help to slow down the evaporation process.
So here we are in the raised veggie patch gardens, and you can see members of the community in spring tending their plots, getting ready for the busy growing season. A pergola provides shelter from rain and sun, and ramps allow accessibility to the different plot levels. A neighbor is mowing the grass, keeping it nice and short for farmers markets and events. Located on a sunny southern slope, but Japanese hornbeam, large white pines, and Chinese tupelo provide pockets of shade in the distance. Entering the park from Alberta Street, you cross over the swale and bike lane and are greeted by the grand allée of trees. It's early autumn, so you are drawn in by the unusually sweet scent of the yellowing katsura leaves and the curiously spiky red fruit of the cornuscusa. The laughter of the neighborhood kids echoes as they play a game of tag, running around the swings hanging from a large red oak. Sitting on a mound in early summer, you bask in a beam of new warm sun, absent-mindedly picking clover flowers. Those who want shade take shelter on the deck. There are happy shouts of neighbors playing a game of spike ball and soccer, and somewhere a guitar is playing. Passerbys are bringing their dogs to the off-leash park, and it seems like they are setting up for an event. On a warm summer evening, you hear music filtering in from your open apartment door, and you wander down to join in on the fun. A group of local musicians are performing. You recognize some of the faces in the crowd as your neighbors, and you find a seat on the terrace to enjoy the show.
Here's our planting palette. Before we get into the species, I'll talk briefly about where the plant types are found on the plan. For the ground cover, we have three different levels of ground cover increasing in height. They correspond roughly to the amount of traffic we expect in an area, with the tallest plants in the least traveled areas. Our swale condition is found at the edges of the site, on the west and the south. Our shrubs are found in small patches typically used around the edges of the park. And the main feature of our trees is the heavily treed area in the southeast and the tree allée cutting through the center. For our three levels of turf, we begin with a mixture based on clovers, moving to a mixture with taller flowers like Roman chamomile and western yarrow. For our tallest level, we introduced echinacea and California poppy, among others. For our swales, we have a selection of grasses and sedges, with 9-bark and Nootka rose filling the role of swale shrubs. Some of the highlights of our shrub palette include the tall arching ocean spray and colorful flowering currant. A quick overview of the trees. The central allée is composed of a mixture of katsura, cornuscusa, and Fraxinus americana, and where something large is required, we use red oak. In the secret garden, we have planted a small grove of white pine. While creating our plant palette, we knew that spring would be beautiful and full of flowers, but we wanted to make sure that the site worked in all seasons. In early spring, the flowering currant starts to bloom. In early summer, the park is alive with flowers. By late summer, the grasses are yellow. In the fall, Nissus sylvatica and Fraxinus americana are colorful. Finishing in winter, the red osier dogwood reveals its red stems. As you have seen, we wanted to make extensive use of a decking material. We also wanted seating reminiscent of a lounge chair that could be built right into the decking. We stuck with a simple palette using crushed gravel for the main path and concrete pavers in the barbecue area.
And lastly, moving to our detailed sections, this is a detailed section and plan of the lawn and barbecue area. So this plan examines the different materials we have designed in the park, where we have permeable paving in the barbecue area, meadow to the left, and turf on the bottom. And this plan shows how we're using hardscape and planting to distinguish space. In our secret garden, it's situated in the south end of the park, and this plan demonstrates our repeated use of decking throughout our design to create a really cohesive park space. Here we design a change in material from gravel along the main allée to decking to create a transition into a new space. In plan and elevation, you can see how this area really contrasts our lawn and barbecue area, where there are many bushes and small trees like Ribes sanguineum and Saskatoon berry that are later followed by larger trees as you move deeper into the garden. And finally, our last section in plan detail is of our retention ponds at the south end of the site. This area is characterized by a series of boardwalks over the ponds that share this decking material that is used throughout the site. This detail shows the swale plantings and shrubberies such as Western fescue grass and Nuka rose. You can also see the change in the form to larger trees in this area of the park, such as white pine and Japanese hornbeam that drapes over areas for seating. And yeah, that's our presentation. So thank you so much for listening.